It wasn't a restaurant we'd ever been to before. It was Mom's treat for me, her 17-year-old daughter, something special and a little upscale. That's why I was so surprised to see what I saw when the waitress came over to our table to take our order. The poor girl had bruises and cuts all over her arms and her wrists. It was clearly evident that she could not have inflicted these on herself. Mom, with a deft but tiny shake of her head, gave me a clear sign that it wasn't our business. Mom thinks it rarely pays off to get involved in something that doesn't concern you. The girl was probably in her late teens, pretty if a little thin. She was polite and efficient when she took our order, but I could tell by the signs of stress on her face she was in trouble. The zone she'd been given to look after in the restaurant included a table at which was seating a rather loud elderly lady. When the girl took this lady's order, to my horror, the woman she was serving looked at the girl's arms and then said something very rude and very loud to her.
"You should be thankful that he even let you live,"
the woman barked at the girl.
"If I was the person who did that to you, I would have done worse."
It was so embarrassing for everyone in the restaurant. The poor girl just stood there, completely humiliated. Everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. It was as if we were all watching a TV reality show. No one got up to come to the poor girl's aid, including Mom and me, I'm ashamed to say. But I was so angry. I almost jumped out of my seat and smacked the rude customer across the cheek. But I could see by the look on the girl's face that this was not the kind of help she needed right then. If I'd have done that, it would probably have made matters worse for her. But I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing, so I called the girl back over to our table. As subtly as I could, I asked her quietly if there was anything I could do to help her. I could see she was distressed. She smiled and nervously told me that there was nothing I could do to help. She was desperate to avoid getting into trouble at work because if anything happened to her source of income, it could do her more harm than good if her boyfriend found out. Like I said, I just couldn't do nothing. So I gave the girl my telephone number and told her if she ever needed any help, then she was to get in touch with me straight away. She thanked me politely, then hurried away to get on with her work. The rest of the meal went by without any further incident, though I felt a little uncomfortable when Mom and I left the restaurant without having helped the girl. A week later, and I'd almost forgotten all about that evening when I suddenly received a text from an unknown number. The text read, "Hey, remember me? I'm the waitress from the restaurant. I'm sorry it took so long to get in touch, but a lot's been going on." I was so surprised to hear from the girl, but I was pleased she'd gotten in touch. Perhaps now there was something I could do to help. After responding to her text, it wasn't long before we spoke, and she told me a whole lot more about her life. I discovered she had a baby daughter, and to my horror, but sadly not to my surprise, I discovered she was in a relationship with a violent boyfriend. She was scared to leave him, even though he treated her terribly. She was afraid that he would not only harm her, but also the child if she ever plucked up the courage to leave. She couldn't go back home. Her family had disowned her and wanted nothing to do with her or her daughter. She didn't even have any friends that were in any position to help her. I made her promise to get in touch with me again if she was ever in distress. One night, about a week after I received her text, she called me. She was in a flood of tears and very distressed about something. Through the sobs, she told me her boyfriend's violence was getting worse. He had hit the baby this time. Although she was very upset, she didn't want me to help her right then. She just needed someone friendly to talk to. I couldn't think of how I could make things better for her anyway. We ended the call with me feeling awful. I don't know why, but I felt I had to do something. I couldn't help feeling that it was down to me to help her turn her life around. Then I had this idea. It was a little bit crazy, but it just might work. So I called her up and I told her, I have a plan. You will hire me as a babysitter, which means that you'd have to bring your daughter to my house so it won't be suspicious. Then, once you drop her off here, you can go back to your house to pack up your things. So choose a time of day when your boyfriend won't be there. But you won't go back there alone. My dad will go back with you. He's a big guy. And not only him, I have 2 brothers just as big as my dad. With those 3 to watch over you, you will definitely be protected if your boyfriend suddenly turns up. The next day, after she dropped off her daughter, Dad and my brothers went with her back to her house to help pack her things. At one point, the boyfriend did turn up unexpectedly, but there was no way he was gonna get tangled up with Dad and my brothers. Yeah, he was a typical bully. But when he had to deal with someone who wasn't weaker than himself, he was a rotten coward. So, she packed her things and left. The plan worked brilliantly. What happened next? It wasn't easy getting away from her controlling and violent boyfriend, sure. But together, we did it. Except, now she was homeless. Well, that wasn't going to happen on my watch. We had plenty of room. We decided that she would live with us for a while until she could find somewhere new and safe she could move into. It was a joy having her and her baby living with us for a while, but she soon got back on her feet. She found a safe place she could afford to move into, so finally she could be independent and she was in control of her life. I know what you're probably thinking. What right has a 17-year-old girl got to poke her nose into someone else's business? I couldn't have just sat there in that restaurant that night. I had to help the girl. And look at the outcome. Not all down to me, I know. But I felt I played a little part in helping the girl get out of a terrible situation and take back control of her life. We should all do what we can to help others that are vulnerable and in a less fortunate position than we are. It's the right thing to do in a civilized society. The girl and I are to this day still friends and in touch regularly. I'm glad I did what I did, and if I had to do it all again, I wouldn't change a thing. And you know, if I ever come across something like this in the future, I wouldn't just sit there and do nothing. I'd have to do whatever I could and help put things right.